to be almost exact. But this is the first where we've had so many prime ministers, presidents, the heads of European nations. And by the way, Alex, I'd like you to say a couple of words too. You're a young, powerful man. Before I finish up, I want you to say a couple of words. Go ahead.
I'll take the notion of youth back to my wife and try to convince her. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think in the past 2 weeks we've probably had more progress in ending this war than we have in the past 3.5 years. And I think the fact that we're around this table today is very much symbolic in the sense that it's Team Europe and Team United States helping Ukraine. And the progress that we're looking out of this meeting is about the security guarantees, which are a big part of this. And then, of course, moving towards a process with a trilateral meeting with you and President Putin and President Zelensky. Some of the international media might wonder, why is the President of Finland here? I think the reason is probably that we might come from a small country, but we have a long border with Russia, over 800 miles. And we, of course, have our own historical experience with Russia from World War II, the Winter War and the War of Continuation. And if I look at the silver lining of where we stand right now, we found a solution in 1944, and I'm sure that we'll be able to find a solution in 2025 to end Russia's war of aggression and find and get a lasting and just peace. The situation is very difficult, but that's why we're here.
Thank you, Alex, very much. Good job. So we're going to be meeting for a while, and we're going to discuss some of the issues. And I don't think there's any issue that's overly complex. It's at a point now where people want to do things. I really do believe, I've known him for a long time. I've always had a great relationship with him. I think that President Putin wants to find an answer too. And we'll see. And in a certain period of time, not very far from now, a week or 2 weeks, we're going to know whether or not we're going to solve this, or is this horrible fighting going to continue. We'll do our best to get it ended. And I believe you have two willing parties, and usually that's good news, but two willing parties that want to make a deal. And we'll journey together, and we'll go over and we'll see if it can be done. And it's possible it might not be able to be done. On the other hand, it's possible it will, and we're going to save thousands and thousands of lives a week. And so it's something we really have to do. And or at least we have to give it our best. It's all you can do. You can give it your best, but I think we may have a very good outcome. So I want to thank you all, and the media, I want to thank you. We're going to be staying here for a little while. Then we're going to walk over to the Oval Office, and we're going to have another little discussion about similar matters. And then they're going to go home to their great countries and report. And I'm going to remain here and work, and you're going to go and work. We're all going to be working. We may be in a different location, but that's what we know how to do, is work. But I want to thank the media. Has been actually very fair, generally speaking, very fair. I think it's important that they're fair, because this is a very important subject. We have to get it ended, and so that's all we ask for, is fairness with the media. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
And that appears to generally be the conclusion of the European meeting with the European leaders, Zelensky and the President of the United States of America. And it does appear that there were some interesting comments made. Generally, we were able to hear that first and foremost, it appears that the most important thing that everyone said is that the war does need to come to an end. However, there are still some greater issues that are involved in bringing the war to an actual end, which is the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation has already been making it clear, while we've been on air live covering that situation, that they are not willing to generally accept any sort of situation that we've seen so far that appears to show that the state of Ukraine may get some sort of Western security guarantees, or may allow for Western forces to be able to be based inside of Ukraine. They have openly refused that already, showing us that a round of talks with the Russian Federation is highly unlikely, if not impossible. And it also does appear that the Russian Federation is once again doubling it down on the practical realm of unconditional surrender being pressed onto the state of Ukraine, instead of any sort of an amicable ceasefire or some sort of a due consideration by both sides being made in the process. But it does appear...
You got to admit, You got to admit that Merz and Macron, the German leader and also the French leader, they actually said what needed to be said. They had the balls to actually say it. They said that a ceasefire is the first logical step instead of jumping straight into a peace deal. And I think that's just basic common sense. You really, if you can't achieve a ceasefire, then obviously you're not going to be able to achieve a peace. That's pretty much straightforward with that one. So the fact that Putin has allegedly told the U.S. president that he agrees to security guarantees for Ukraine, but also at the same time, though, Putin objects to U.S. troops being in Ukraine. It's like how can he accept security guarantees, but at the same time say that he's not going to allow troops into Ukraine? It seems to go contradictory to one another.
It seems as though it was doublespeak by the Russian Federation. They are totally fine with Ukraine having security guarantees as long as the security guarantees are now actually enforced and there are no peacekeeping troops inside of Ukraine to ensure or provide the actual security guarantees to the state of Ukraine. I think that that's generally where the confusion is popping up at the moment, because it does appear that the Russian Federation is once again playing their usual tricks and games, because the Russian Foreign Ministry has already been putting out statements in the midst of those talks that we just saw right there, making it wildly clear that they are not accepting any situation where any Western troops, especially American troops, are ever allowed back into Ukraine. But with that in mind, Matthew, what are you thinking about it?
I would say, generally speaking, I'm still shocked at how well this meeting has gone because I was expecting some fireworks between the European leader Zelensky and the U.S. president. Still no fireworks. Generally pretty respectful. It's a huge change from the last time. And of course, the European leaders were not there last time. That's a new addition this time. But I would say generally it's gone extremely well. Now, one thing I will note is it looks like the NATO Secretary General really didn't speak up when it comes to like the things that Merz and also Macron stated, but at least somebody said it. So that was a good sign. Also, Zelensky did mention something else during the talks right there. He said he had the best conversation with the U.S. president ever. And also, I believe the Prime Minister of Italy, Meloni, also stated that they have to discuss security guarantees first. And that's a precondition of peace. So overall, I would say it seems like everybody's on the same page. The only person that's not on the same page appears to be Putin and the U.S. president. The U.S. president believes that Putin is serious about the claims that he's making, that he wants to end the war. But I think we all know the truth, that Putin is not serious. Putin is saying what he needs to say in order to buy more time and to basically try to dupe the U.S. officials into believing that he's serious. There's no indication that Putin is serious. He's not agreeable to a ceasefire. He's not agreeable to security guarantees by putting U.S. troops on the ground. He's not agreeable to anything. So I don't know what the U.S. president is thinking in his head. Like, of course, it's his opinion. He's entitled to his opinion. I personally don't agree with it. I think that Putin is clearly not serious based on everything we've heard.
I'd have to agree. I don't believe that the Russian Federation is going to be serious in any sort of negotiation. And right now, we are generally setting ourselves up to see that the Russians are going to shoot this down or find some sort of a creative way to not directly shoot it down, but prolong the process to the point it may as well be shot down. So it does appear that that is the ongoing situation at the moment, based off of what we're seeing and hearing from the European leaders, the President of the United States, and the President of Ukraine currently. And with that in mind, we're actually going to be moving into some more questions in the meantime. And also, folks, depending on whether or not the European leaders are able to make it back out into the public again, that's generally going to be dictating how long we are on air. If this talk goes on for over an hour, we most likely will be off air by that point and just waiting for Zelensky's interview, which apparently will be conducted on Fox News later tonight. But generally, it depends on how long this talk will be and how long
Mika loves travelling with his mates. The stag group chat.
Get that out of my. There you go. Oh, there you go. Whoa, whoa, what?
Right in front of you guys. Okay, point to 29 Houston.
that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would generally have to say that ceding land to the Russian Federation, or any nation for that matter, is generally a bad idea, as it starts to lay out that that aggressiveness actually is incentivized from a foreign policy perspective, much like the Nazi Germans found that their aggressiveness would allow them to remilitarize the Rhineland, annex Austria, and also annex the Czech Republic as well, without firing a single shot, and then going straight into invading Poland in 1939, which finally was the straw that broke the camel's back. But as far as the Germans were concerned, they might be able to get even further territories without firing a shot, which was the free city of Danzig. Providing territory to the Russian Federation is going to do the very same thing. It is showing them that aggressiveness in foreign policy is actually successful, and it will allow for them to continue to act aggressively and continue to get concessions because the West is wanting to avoid confrontation, while the Russians are doing nothing but trying to pursue a confrontation. So generally that is the reason why it's a bad idea, just at its simple premise, not making it very complicated, is that it's incentivizing aggressiveness on the foreign policy sphere. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Uncle Fester Quests, and he puts in a 5. He said, do you think Russia will threaten NATO directly after this? Oh, they've already started, by the way.
Oh yeah, they've already started. So I would have to say guaranteed, because they're already doing it. So a big thanks to you once again for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to United Kempo Martial Arts Academy, who puts in a 5, and thank you very much as well for that support. They said, sorry if it's too political. They said here, let's see here. It seems to be that the U.S. leaders change their mind quite easily, but if you can't respond, take a question from the chat.
I thank you for the support. Generally, that is true, because analysis-wise, that's definitely the case. We don't really know what's going on any given week because the president can just change his mind. That's something that you generally don't see in most other administrations. Whether you like their decisions or not, they're usually pretty dead set on a certain path of decisions or reactions to certain kinds of outcomes. But the current president can be a bit of a wild card. I think he's becoming more predictable at this point, because now today it actually went opposite than I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to be another ambush to try and redirect and then try and blame the Ukrainians for the conflict, to take the blame off of himself possibly. But instead, a different approach was taken, which is now starting to show that he's falling under a more predictable sort of a foreign policy approach, which we could actually generally predict with some accuracy if this remains the case. But at least up until now, it was a fairly unpredictable sort of a routine that was made by the president to just pick different decisions depending on the literal day of the week. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and I do thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Alan McMillan, and thank you very much, Alan, as well, for that £10 donation, by the way, all the way from the UK, I would assume. And thank you very much, Alan, as well, for helping keep the channel running. And we also have a super chat here from none other than Gregory C., who puts in a 5. He said, keep it up on the day off, and nice coverage, men, and LSA.
And thank you so much for enjoying our coverage on the day off, and we're more than happy to do it. And a massive thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Nathan Turnage, who puts in a 5. And thank you, Nathan, as well, for supporting the channel, and we do appreciate that. We also have a 3 from Jason Curling. He said, thanks for the Monday stream, and I do appreciate it very much.
And thank you so much for enjoying it. I haven't slept for probably about 36 hours at this point, and it is just because we want to make sure to keep this stream running 24/7. Absolutely no other reason. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running day in and day out, where I can stay up 36 hours straight. So a huge thanks to you once again.
Stay up 36 hours straight.
Oh, I just couldn't sleep last night. But with that, we are on to the next one.
Our next one here goes to Zachary Van Dyke, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Zachary. He says, keep up the good coverage.
And thank you so much, Zachary, for supporting the channel, and we sure will. And so a huge thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from It's Court, who said, ridiculous that peace requires a suit, SMH.
And I'd have to say it is a little bit odd in some extents, but still, nonetheless, it's good to see that things are going pretty decently. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Smarzig, and Smarzig put in a 2 and said, it's time to sign another piece of paper.
And I'd have to thank you for the support, Smarzik, and I'd have to say, it's always time to sign some paper. We all know it's time to get up and get that paper. And so a huge thanks to you once again. I hope that was addressed that well. We're on to the next one.
And this one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts
You may have heard that my streaming crime network, True Blue, and I are investigating the exploitation of children on the popular gaming platform Roblox. Well, it's absolutely true, and we're deep into it. I've already interviewed law enforcement investigators and victims of this horrible activity. And we have some collaborators, some people who've been working in this space, including Schlepp, who have committed to help us in this endeavor. Will Roblox actually say anything about it? Will it make any changes? We're going to do our best to hold them accountable. Stay tuned. We're working hard on this project.
Well, you heard it straight direct from the man himself. Chris Hansen, the investigative journalist who is best known for hosting the TV series To Catch a Predator, is getting involved in the ongoing controversy with Roblox surrounding child safety issues on their platform. Now, Roblox, I didn't really know much about it before this, but apparently it's a popular online gaming platform that has over 380 million users, roughly half of whom are under 16 years old. And like he said, the documentary is going to air on Hansen's streaming platform, True Blue, and aims to highlight systemic failures similar to his past work confronting online predators. If there's one thing that brings people together, usually as a uniting factor, is that protecting children. So as I hear
We are going to take a short break. Stay with us. You're watching, and that is going need
is a lot of
independent nation.
I believe Trump has other interests. He has American interests and interests of global leader, but he doesn't feel this existentially. For European leaders, for Europe, war in Ukraine against Ukraine, it's something that matters to them because it directly affects the whole Europe. And I think Trump is on a very different line in all of these motivations, but that's fine, because if he wants to go to the history as the peacemaker, we would be all very happy if he achieves, and we are grateful to that. But let's see. Very hard to expect Putin being happy with what was and is discussed right now in these seconds, and I don't think that Putin will like it.
Well, Donald Trump was asked, wasn't he, when he was sat alongside President Zelensky, is it fair that land is given up to Russia that they've not yet won, including those critical fortress cities, as we've been describing, in the Donetsk? How would people feel about any of that land being given up? The battle for Bakhmut that we watched so carefully and so closely for so many months. Would people feel in Ukraine that people had died for nothing?
Exactly. Ukrainians will not accept this idea of the territory exchange, because people gave away their lives for Bakhmut and for other places. There are hundreds of kilometers and thousands of our territory, and it's not about the piece of real estate. That's a part of your heart. It's a part of your soul. It's a part of your history. Very hard to imagine how historically we can accept this. So what President Zelensky says speaks actually the voice of Ukrainian people, that we are not ready for territorial exchanges. So, but if we are not ready, very hard to imagine what will be the outcome and what Putin will partially or fully accept. So very hard to say.
Lisa Yasko, we really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. And, everybody also questioning what's happening with the Ukrainian children. We saw Zelensky give a letter thanking Melania Trump for raising the missing thousands of children who've been taken into Russia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you very much indeed. And, the word came only recently that Russia is decentralizing its adoption system, which would mean tracking down those children would be almost impossible. Well, let's bring in now Nigel Gould-Davis, former UK ambassador to Belarus. He is now the editor of Strategic Survey, which analyses relationships between major powers, and is also a senior fellow for Russia and Eurasia at the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Very good to see you. So your feelings so far, are we edging to anything?
I very much fear that we're not. I mean, the good news, as others have observed, is that the atmospherics of the Trump-Zelensky meeting were warm. I would say the body language and the way they spoke to one another was actually somewhat warmer and certainly more relaxed than in the aftermath of the Alaska summit between Trump and Putin. There was no repeat of the disaster of late February when Zelensky was last in the Oval Office. However, on the fundamental issues, there is no indication whatsoever that there's been any narrowing in Ukraine's and Russia's positions. And specifically, the person whose position will have to change in order for peace to be achieved, which is to say Putin, he wasn't part of that conversation. And it's very, very important, I think, to understand. And your conversation just a moment ago with Ms. Yaska hit the nail on the head here. It's very important to understand this war in Putin's mind is not primarily about acquiring a small additional piece of territory. Russia is comfortably the largest country in the world already. The area that it occupies of Ukraine would, if it were incorporated into Russia, add 0.7% to Russia's total already recognized landmass. It's not for that reason that Putin has already lost, killed or wounded 1 million of his citizens in this awful war. His ambitions and his agenda go much, much further. And he has been very, very explicit and very, very consistent about this. This is what his constant references to the root causes of the war refer to. He does not believe that Ukraine exists as a legitimate state and independent identity. His ultimate goal remains unchanged. For that reason, matters of territory are at most a detail, and it follows from that too that discussions of security guarantees are also at this point a detail. They put the cart before the horse. If there's a glimmer of hope here, it's a point that appeared in the Oval Office, which I think has been underestimated, and that is the use of the word trilateral. Now, both Zelensky and Trump spoke about the possibility of a trilateral meeting, Trump, Zelensky, and Putin together. Now, I very much doubt that Putin would accept such an offer. He has repeatedly made clear he does not consider Zelensky a legitimate president anymore, will not sit down with him. So it's a very sort of smart thing for Zelensky to press the case for that. Trump appears to accept it. Putin, as I said, almost certain to reject that. And that will make it clearer than ever, even in Trump's mind, one would hope, that it's Putin that is the obstacle to peace.
So you're saying, in a sense, whatever happens today, that actually the nations of the former Soviet Union, the 15 republics, should all be scared still. We've seen conflicts in places like Georgia, haven't we? That actually Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia should still be worried.
Absolutely. And just to bring home the fact that Putin's ambitions go far beyond the area that Russia currently occupies, they go far beyond the territory of Ukraine itself. Russia, and there's no dispute about this, no ambiguity, the Russian intelligence services are waging what our intelligence services describe as a campaign of dangerous recklessness in our countries. They are planning sabotage attacks. They have planned assassination attacks in a large number of European countries. At no point has Putin ever said or even hinted, well, we just want an extra slice of territory and then we'll be satisfied, we'll be a status quo power, and we will accept the new order of things. No, Putin's ambition is to recast European security on terms ultimately dictated by Russia. He hopes to get, and certainly at Alaska, I think, had hoped to get Trump's approval or acceptance for that. Fortunately, we see no sign of that now. It is helpful again that Trump has invited the Europeans. That wasn't something we could assume. Putin had made very clear, as he said at Alaska, he didn't want Europeans to torpedo what he wanted to remain as a strictly bilateral negotiation between himself and Trump. Trump now is again once tacking back, as it were, in what's been a very back and forth process towards a European position. But ultimately, he will have to choose. Trump will have to choose whether he takes the Russian point of view on these things or the European point of view. I see no prospect of those positions narrowing.
So do you think he understands in any way the fundamental principles over which this war has been fought? Firstly, that aggressors who invade and steal land should not be rewarded. And secondly, as we have already discussed, that Ukraine is an independent sovereign nation. Do you think he understands those? And one final point too, is this a failure for NATO if Russia gains any land in Ukraine?
Firstly, I think, I'm afraid it's not clear, at least to me, that President Trump does understand those things. But again, the really even more fundamental matter to understand is the extent of Putin's ambitions. This is not about a slice of territory. It's about a much larger continent, ultimately continent-wide agenda. Whether it would be a defeat for NATO, well, it's a very, very hypothetical question because no one is seriously raising the prospect now in Europe that Russia would gain any part of Ukrainian territory permanently, rather than the mere de facto occupation we see. I think the real fear as far as NATO is concerned is if at some point Trump does land and were to decide, were to go back to a position that's essentially sympathetic to Russia, and we feared in the aftermath of Alaska, it looked like that. It doesn't now, but it looked like that. It might again. If Trump were to do that, that's a position on Ukraine and indeed on European security that European countries could not possibly accept or agree to. And that would constitute in effect, a breach of the transatlantic alliance. That's something, of course, that Putin would welcome very much. The next step is to see how these discussions that Trump is engaged in now with the leading European partners
and strong end to this conflict that will ensure that not only is the peace in Ukraine longer lasting, but the war does not spread or spill over into Eastern Europe at any point in the future. But I definitely agree with you on that, and I got to thank you incredibly for the support, Wilness, and being the hoof trimmer of the LSA from Latvia. And a huge thanks to you once again for enjoying this channel and supporting it. And also a big shout out to Robert Krogan, who threw in a 2 as well with no comment.
Hey, big shout out to you both, Robert and Wilness.
Yeah, big shout out to both of y'all. And so with that, folks, it is time for us to round out this stream for the day. I thank you all so much once again for watching. I hope you all enjoyed hearing of the major developments, news, and information that was coming about the meeting in Washington here on this channel. And we're terribly sorry for the technical glitches, because apparently there's been a decent amount of them from the White House's live stream on one end and then on YouTube from another. Nevertheless, we still...
So here it is, one of the happiest days in the land of
going to watch Everton.